to make it into
Okay. So much has been said, and my brain's kind of going around, and I wonder whether to not say what I prepared and just respond as well. But I'll just begin by the title "Our Museum's Racist" is a kind of quite a flippant way of almost saying, look, is he a racist or isn't he racist? To me, there's a kind of misunderstanding between prejudice and racism, and where prejudice, we can all have prejudices against all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons, and it's almost a personalised thing. Although groups of football fans can be prejudiced against others, one village cannot like the next village. Racism is something where a whole range of structures and a whole broad set of ideas, practices, reinforce, maintain and instigate an inferior status to people of colour and people who have migrated from depleted economies. And to me, when we say somebody is racist, we're living in a whole range of influences and material conditions that are creating a power relationship between different people. I think that somebody who will call somebody else a racist name can also, be a friend of that same person. And there's a guy called Antonio Gramsci, who some of you might have heard of, who's done some work on something he calls contradictory consciousness, which I think is something that is really important to explore more of, because to me it's the key in terms of understanding how you can change things that people can have, and institutions as well, I think, can be very contradictory, in that they can embody racist practices as well as trying to fight the same practices that they embody, and people can do the same thing and do the same thing. So racism to me is as much about the idea that stereotyping Chinese people are always working takeaways in restaurants or do kung fu, or black guys are always tough or cool. It's also about people throwing stones at other people. It's about teachers leaving schools when there are increasing numbers of migrant kids. It's about the colour and features on an Action Man toy. It's about never seeing non-white soldiers who fought for the British in World War II. It's about over-focusing on pharaohs and pyramids when looking at Egyptian history. It's about all of those things and loads more things as well. And there's an element of collusion that I think we all have, as I think it was Jaya was saying, that we have to decolonize our minds, whether you're white or black, and I use the term black generically as well. We're all able, and because there are so many structures that are racist around us, it's difficult to not collude at various times. To me, racist ideas did not start with slavery. They, as such, and certainly slavery isn't the reason for racism. Racism is a set of ideas that are actively promoted to justify, as Ian was mentioning, to justify why various races and nations should be robbed, enslaved, colonised, killed, abused, exploited. And to me, it's by dehumanising people, because to me that's the effect of racism. It's easy to feel okay about those people being not equal to us if you're on the oppressive end of things. And to me, over the last 20, 30 years, there's been quite a change in, certainly in Britain and in some other European countries. There's been a process of multiculturalism which has liberalised a lot of ideas. When I was growing up, then I would regularly walk down the street and have white kids who'd walk past me and they'd be going kind of doing mumbo jumbo stuff as if I must be some thicko from some tribe somewhere else. I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. and kids will understand something about the religion that I'm from. I think with the imagery that we're able to receive about life in other countries, I think that racism has become much more sophisticated, but also people see other people as being like themselves. So I think people see people in war-ridden, war-torn countries, and part of us thinks these are corrupt regimes, and that's the way they always are, and that's endemic to that mentality or those people, or that's a natural condition. The other part, I think, actually thinks, hold on, they're people like us, they're living lives like us, and I don't think that used to happen. And I think that there's a strong movement that's growing to say that multiculturalism, for all its faults, I don't think it was, there were a lot of problems with the movement. And there is a strong movement to say that it's gone too far. And there's a very interesting book which I recommend everybody to read, which is called The End of Tolerance by Aaron Kundnani, published by the Institute of Race Relations. It's just come out, where he's talking about that with specific reference to people seeking asylum and the racism the current racism in society that's a part of, as well as the Islamophobia and the stuff to do with the Iraq War and all kinds of other things, and kind of racist tensions as they're being played out right now. And I think that one of the things that the book says is that multiculturalism has to be kept going, even though 15, 20 years ago there were a number of us who were attacking multiculturalism for not going far enough. And now we're in a position where we're trying to fight to keep it going because racism has been increasing considerably. In this scenario, to look at museums, which undoubtedly represent Eurocentric ways of holding and presenting knowledge and looking at the world, and whose collections have been developed according to patterns of colonial adventure, and whose structures reflect the hierarchies of race. When I say the structures, I mean the people who work in them, the hierarchies within museums. And little of this has changed, despite the worthy efforts of a smattering of projects within certain museums. And in an ideal world, I think we would restructure the entire way that museums work, from top to bottom, all the collections, everything. In practice, we're only usually able to push for the odd projects that we can engage with, to be more challenging interventions which can clearly inform and encourage debate about present-day racism. To me, it's not enough to talk about the way racism was, because then you're able to say, that was then, we're not like that anymore, we're multicultural, we're this, that and the other. There are continuing new forms of being able to justify and see people in dehumanized ways and say, well, okay, that's okay. Discussing the way racism has been portrayed can be informative, but if we're in the ballgame of saying, well, it's no longer there, then I've got real problems, or even that people aren't racist. I think that we have to understand that we're complex beings, that workers, it's not that we are not racist, that people individually carry out racist practices and are racist, as well as institutions are racist. And there is always a tendency to rewrite history that we need to be recognised and challenged when we're doing projects. So this year, as everybody knows, it's been the 200 years since the abolition of Slavery Act, the Slave Trade Act. And personally, I've noticed that there's been a strong interest in looking at what the British state has done to remove slavery, and very little emphasis on the number of slave rebellions and some of the key slave figures themselves, but the role that they had. And I find that really disappointing. It's also this year is the 150th anniversary of one of the key uprisings against colonialism in the entire empire, which is the 1857 War of Independence in India, called the Indian Mutiny, I think, by the British. And very little, I've seen very little talked about that, and I think that the kind of it feels to me that when black people, and I use the term generically again, do something against empire, then it's not of interest. When British people do something that seems to be good to eradicate something like rape, something like slavery, then it is of interest. And why is that?